Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
No,
around the body. Jazz up!
He's off from inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal from inside the centre. Fuck! I can't believe it.
Good time of day, everyone. This is episode 229 of Americans Watching the Footy, our round one recap. I am Benjamin Castle coming to you from South San Francisco, California.
No, you're not.
Maybe I want to be at times. I'm actually in San Diego. I want to see if Ethan would catch it, and he did.
Yeah, I'm the one in South San Francisco, and right next to me is our executive producer, Brian Harambe.
Nice to have him in the room. That may not persist throughout the entire recording. So from Thursday through Sunday, we had our first full round of footy. That felt nice.
I will admit, I am not totally up to date. I have watched 4 of the games out of this round, but I have good excuses. I will explain all of that as we get into the Saturday game. So I have watched 4 of the 9 games, and I'm going to watch the others before the next round starts. But there's going to be a lot, at least in the latter half of this show, of me asking Benjamin what happened and how things happened.
That's right, folks. It's going to be a Benjamin episode. Stick around for the fun. Here's the clicker. No one will blame you. Richmond 13. We're not laughing at you, Richmond. We're laughing with you. Richmond 13-4-82 defeated Carlton 9-15-69. Nice. Even though the real kind of nice moment was not Carlton Hill. Congratulations to, 6 Richmond players on their first AFL wins? Including Jacob Blight, who sadly had to leave the game injured, James Trezise, who did a lot of carrying from halfback, and the impeccably named Steely Green, along with their 3 debutantes, Harry Armstrong, Luke Traynor, and Rising Star nominee Sam Lawler.
You didn't watch this live. You were sleeping, and I thought for sure you were just gonna wake up, check the score to see how bad it was and what you had to go back to watch. I was absolutely shocked you had not seen it. So you actually got to go through this and kind of experience it, yeah?
I did. This was on Thursday after I finished my work, and I just enjoyed it. I very purposefully left myself out of the loop. I didn't want any spoilers because that's how I like to do things. And once I finished my mammoth assignment, then I went back and saw how Richmond actually did. I was slightly enthused at halftime when it was 50-25. Didn't expect much. Then scores level at 3/4 time. I thought, okay, they're not quite running out of gas, but I don't think they're going to do this. And then they actually just did it.
Pulled ahead by 3 goals even.
Won by 3 goals still.
Won by just over 2 goals, but yeah, they led by 17.
And they took their power from a couple things, most notably Camden McIntosh's headband and Sam Lawler's head. McIntosh, by the way, doing his best Alex Caruso with the bald headband look. And he was tagging? I don't recall him tagging before. Didn't prevent Patrick Cridd from having an impact, but definitely bothered him.
Yeah, so Cripps actually was one of the better players for Carlton. Was he great? Maybe not. Of getting some stuff out of the middle. Still got 9 clearances, but was barely able to affect the game inside the forward 50, and nobody else could either. So where to start here? I think kind of got to go through this a little bit chronologically. End of the first quarter was 34-7. It was yeah, this is about what we expected. Got to 48-7. It was when I did tip this, I put the margin at 81. And Shay Maxey guy, one of my favorite Richmond follows, posted our expectations were low for you, but holy fuck. They get a couple going into halftime. Still felt very comfortable at that point. And then once they came out of the gate and got the first couple in the third quarter, it was like, okay, this is slightly interesting. Once it had gotten down to 1 goal on Jack Ross's second, then it was really interesting. They tied it by the end of the third. By that point, I'm thinking, all right, now the big boys step up and Carleton survives and wins. Even after Richmond got the opening goal of the fourth, I felt that way. It wasn't until they had a 2-goal lead, which was off of Nick Haynes dropping an easy intercept. That was kind of the one where he and Jacob Wiedering spoiled each other. Then Harry Armstrong, who had a pretty quiet game otherwise, made a great play along the boundary to shove Haynes out of the way and then hit Jacob Bauer in the goal square. Then Ryan Mansell gets the goal. Carleton does get it back down to 7. Really fucked up. Matthew Cottrell had an open Francis Evans in the middle and instead took it himself from a worse angle, and that left him down 7 with 1:10 left. And it's like, all right, unless some insane shit like, Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn last year happens, this is probably over. And they get it downfield and it's really over. And then Seth Campbell gets his foot on one in the goal square and then does the cartwheel and backflip, which was just awesome. And for one night, we were all Richmond fans. I'd be fine with this Richmond rebuild going on for a while, or even being unsuccessful. But I definitely like them more than at least a few other clubs. Of the big 4, they're one of the more tolerable. Definitely take them over Hawthorn. Maybe take them over Sydney. Kind of implied take them over both Carleton and Collingwood. Someday we will look back and think of this as a simpler time before Richmond got good again. But for now, it was kind of fun. Just I don't know if I've ever yelled yellow and black at the end of a game like that. That was awesome. And it was fun to enjoy with literally every fan base except Carleton. I think watching Carleton lose is more fun than watching Collingwood lose, because Collingwood fans are generally funnier after Carleton losses than Carleton fans are after Collingwood losses.
I definitely sang along as well. Thankfully, it was in an empty house at the time. I think I was actually, out of the 3 units that were here, I was the only one there. So yeah, I sang it pretty proudly out of shock.
This was fun.
It was. And, I had mentioned on our preview that Jack Ross was a player that I saw as really important to Richmond. If he could step up from that second tier of their list to their top tier, then I thought that would be a good sign. And he definitely stepped up in this game with Richmond needing to have a new look. He's going to be at the front of it. Kicked 2 from 28 disposals, 7 clearances, and 591 meters gained. He's going to be that half-forward link along with Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto. They all can do it in the center, and they all can take it to half-forward as well.
Broadcasters were saying, and I think it was true, when they were down, 5+ goals early, it was they can't let it be this easy. Someone in the midfield's got to stand up. And I think that happened from both Taranto and Hopper. Hopper, non-existent first half, good second half. Jack Ross, between just the 2 goals, the energy he provided, the physicality, the run through the middle, he was easily the best game I've seen him play. Sam Waller, let's talk about him.
2 goals for 18, 8 score involvements, 1 potential indecent exposure charge, and 1 Rising Star nomination. Yeah, as advertised, and I fucking hate that already the talk is, give him the number 4. He's just like Dusty. Let him be his own player.
He's his own player. You know what I kind of saw him as, actually? I see him as a better Cam Zurhaar, kind of, with how physical he is, but and the offensive ability. I'm not going to go out there and say, oh, this is another Matt Rowell, but better Cam Zurhaar. I see it just in, the body type, the way he plays. Do you get that at all, or how would you kind of describe him?
I hadn't really thought of a player comp yet, honestly. I wanted to see a bit more of him first. I think over the past couple years, we haven't seen as much of that half-forward movement from Zurhaar, but I can see it, I guess, and probably because you had the North Melbourne game, it was on your mind too.
Oh, no, it was on my mind from the beginning. It was on my mind Thursday night. Other players who were really, really good in this game. Normally, if you notice Ruckman a lot, it's because one of them did something really dumb, or keeps giving away frees, or is completely outplaying the other. I don't know the last time I've seen a game where both ruckmen really brought it like this. Toby Nankervis definitely got the better of Tom DeConing, beat him in hitouts, had 2 goals, but both were really strong. And I don't know, when's the last time you walked away from a game thinking, man, both ruckmen were really good?
That's honestly hard because I was thinking I don't know, one of the 2022 or 23 finals must have made a case for that. It's not something to really think about, but yeah, I was really impressed with both of them in this game. And we know what Tom DeConing's utility is, and I still will maintain that Carlton are better without Mark Pitnet in there. He keeps playing like that. My case is just going to be made even stronger.
Both teams also had a really good defensive performance that was recognized in the coaches' votes.
Carlton's is obvious. It's Jacob Wiedering. He is the lifeblood of Carlton's resistance. And for Richmond, I did not expect Funky Ben Miller to step up the way he did.
He was excellent. The numbers weren't as good as Wiedering. Wiedering, when Carlton was rolling, he was kind of sneaking up the ground and getting close to midfield where he was getting his intercepts. Finished the night with 14 intercepts, 11 marks, 8 intercept marks. Miller, 9 intercepts, 4 spoils, 6 marks, 13 disposals. Miller also won 5 of his 6 1v1s. If it wasn't for him early, they could have been down 60 instead of 41. And then he made some big plays after they had gotten momentum as well. So I really liked his game, and I'm glad that the coaches, or at least a coach, recognized it. I guess we'd have to be a coach because looking at the votes, he had to have been picked as 4th best by one of the coaches and not picked by the other.
He stayed back, not one to really venture super far, and did his job. That's a huge tick for Richmond's plans. Unfortunate that Jacob Blight had to go out because I liked his beginning as well. He was close to my votes in the first half, but there's something there. Other notes for Richmond, yes, Seth Campbell's got speed. We knew that before his foot race with Lockie Cowan for the final goal preceding the backflip, but if you didn't before, you do now. I love him and Ryan Mansell together as fast and pesky small forwards, so keep that going, Richmond.
I now understand how you could make a lineup without Morris Rioli in it. I still am very pro Morris Rioli, but
hey, they won without him.
Yeah, it's justifiable.
And looking at potential depth in terms of the talls, he doesn't have the build to be the tall for Richmond, and with Tom Lynch suspended, that's a fascinating conversation. But Jacob Bauer in there is a 3rd tall with his vertical and his hands. I like that. He got a bit of reward this game too.
Before we get into the Tom Lynch discourse, let's talk Carlton. So 3 players are pretty much able to say, we did not lose this game.
Wiedering is one.
Tom DeConing is another, and Patrick Cripps is the other.
I'll name one other player.
Cooper Lord, because he got subbed out when he shouldn't have.
Yeah, he's the main one there. Yeah, that was kind of shocking. As much as I like Frank Evans, he was really quiet aside from his 1 goal, and he would have been my pick if you're trying to keep structure the same.
I guess you could also say George Hewitt played pretty well. First half, the guys who stood out to me were him and Lucas Camporeale. Although Camporeale was pretty silent after halftime, and that's probably who I would have subbed out, if not Francis Evans or Brody Kemp.
You see, Kemp had importance as that 2nd tall, so once Charlie Curnow comes back potentially this Thursday, I don't know what's going to be going on from there.
There were some weird coaching decisions, not just the sub. I didn't like matching up Jack Silvani with Tom Lynch. I know he drew some positive comments, but I thought it was just size-wise a really poor choice. At one point, they threw Cripps into the ruck. I liked the idea, and there were a couple times where they did it with Harry Mackay. That makes sense. Get him involved when he's been quiet, but why are you making Patrick Cripps your ruckman? I did not understand that at all. Mitch McGovern just played a really crappy game. One of the most glaring poor performances. Sam Walsh was very quiet. And yeah, it was fun listening in to some of the Carlton stuff after, whether it was Blue Abroad or some of the others. And people are panicking very quickly with how they lost this game and how they ended last season. Questioning culture stuff, questioning toughness. I think the biggest thing to question is just, I think you got to question coaching out of this game and the fact that Patrick Cripps really can't win an entire game by himself. He can be very good, but he ain't winning the game by himself. There have to be a couple other pieces in there.
But he's still getting the 3 votes, right?
I mean, not from us, but from the umpires, probably. Like, I could actually see the umpires giving the 3 to Jack Ross. Coaches gave 9 to Ross, 9 to Toby Nankervis. Jack Ross was the best midfielder in this game. So that's who I'd give it to.
That's who I see them giving it to if I actually know his fucking name. So Tom Lynch was suspended 1 game for an elevated shoulder to Tom de Koning's jaw. And because de Koning wasn't concussed, he got off more easily. This reminds me of the stuff with Kazi Pickett, like what he did to Bailey Smith last year. And it's part of something that's a common thread through round 1. The fact that the grading is really fucked up, that if you concuss somebody, you're automatically on the hook for more, regardless of intent.
Like, this is the sort of behavior that you got to get out of the game. And this has nothing to do with it being Tom Lynch. It could have been from Nakaya Cockatoo, and I would have felt the same way.
Oh, don't you dare say that in front of Craig.
But he elevates, throws his shoulder into him, has very little to do with the play. Like, that's the sort of thing that's more likely to turn someone's brain into oatmeal. This is the exact sort of thing that should not be within the game. Whether or not they get concussed, that's the behavior you got to get out. And like, remember, usually I'm ripping on, Carlton getting off easily. I'm surprised doing this against Carlton, especially for a player with a reputation like Tom Lynch, didn't get more. But like, forget the names involved, forget the uniforms involved, just watch the fucking play.
The matrix for suspensions needs to totally be redone or done away with.
It's not a matrix, it's a flowchart.
Whatever it is, it's fucked.
Again, the focus needs to be on the dangerous behavior, not unfortunate outcomes. And 3 games into the season, we're already having this discussion, and that's just fucking unbelievable.
I find it completely fucking believable because this is Michael Christian in the AFL.
Hawthorn 17-9-111 defeating Essendon 12-13-85. Another game where it was a 27-point lead after a quarter, but a far less hilarious outcome.
Unlike the game the night before, the result of this one wasn't really in doubt past the first quarter. There was no gigantic fight back. It wasn't quite wire to wire because Essendon did get the first goal courtesy of Isaac Kako.
There were times when they were a goal away from making things interesting. They got it down to 22 with 7 minutes left in the third. It was only 18 with a little over 8 minutes left, but Hawthorn immediately got the next one off of one of the many dumb Essendon plays on the night. Nick Martin trying to soccer backwards towards his own goals out of the contest. And that led to a Dylan Moore goal. Essendon didn't get back down to 18 again until there were about 4 minutes left. And then immediately Jai Newcomb center clearance. Finn McGuinness mark versus Jackson Pryor. Finn McGuinness goal. Good night.
You see, even at that point, I didn't feel anything in terms of just Essendon still has a fighting chance, because every time Essendon had that good run of play, that goal, what would Hawthorn do? Center clearance goal. They had 4 goals from center bounces, and each of them came right after Essendon goals. Just whenever the Bombers did anything positive from the second through the fourth, Hawthorn had the answer. And Hawthorn had those answers despite being at a disadvantage in terms of size up forward. And on paper, having some similar strengths in terms of the number of guys that could factor into the midfield, honestly. Like, with Will Day playing forward, especially, it really felt like at times, Newcomb Nash versus Merritt Caldwell would be the lay of the land. And Newcomb won that battle, but it was when Hawthorn were able to get out. And they were just so much cleaner as well. They restricted Essendon's movement, but also Essendon made a lot of unforced errors. Hawthorn didn't. And they were flexible in terms of going down the middle with those core guys in the center square, also using the flanks well with pieces like Massimo D'Ambrosio, Carl Amon with his 28 disposals and 2 goal assists, Connor McDonald going anywhere he damn well pleases.
I thought Amon was easily the best player in the first quarter, which was the one quarter where they really had clearly the superior team. Because if you look at the rest of the game, Essendon ended up beating them on inside 50s, crushing them on clearances, which was really surprising. Jai Caldwell had a lot to do with that. Didn't have a ton of support. Caldwell, most of what I noticed with other players from Essendon was negative rather than positive, other than a really nice first half out of Xavier Dersma, although Caldwell's got to be the polished turd out of this game, yeah?
Yeah.
But that first half from Xavier Dersma was one of the best halves he's played since coming to Essendon. He was very quiet and forgettable last year, and it's nice to see him come out and start so well.
Hi, Xavier. Hi, Dean. I think a lot of it for Xavier, too, was just his repeated hamstring trouble. So there's that as well. For Essendon, I thought they were kicking too long from the back, and then they just, again, struggled making kick connections throughout the games. They, yes, won at stoppage, but they didn't win in transition. So there's a lot to be patched up there. I really don't know why they insist on Mason Redmond in the midfield and why he was at a quarter of their center bounces. That didn't work. His matchup against Jai Newcomb didn't work. Like, you have knocked dead Ben Hobbs, you have Elijah Sadas. Use those pieces.
It should come as no surprise that when Essendon was good in this game, had a good bit to do with Archie Perkins and Sam Durham. That was kind of the case last year as well.
Durham much more so than Perkins.
The two-ruck thing, so I've heard different takes from different people. A lot of people thought Sam Draper was pretty crappy in this game. I thought even though he had he can be kind of reckless and just have moments where it's like nobody taught him how to play football, and his hit-out numbers weren't great. I liked him more than Nick Bryan. I couldn't tell you what Nick Bryan was trying to do half the time or what the purpose was of having him out there. Andrew McGrath was really poor and just kind of racked up empty numbers. Nick Martin had an awful start before settling in. I mean, his first quarter might have been the worst quarter he's ever played. And then he had that bad turnover late that made sure there was no chance of a really cool comeback. Ben Mackay got bullied by some of the talls from a not very tall lineup first half. Second half, he was decent at least.
Yeah, that was surprising that Essendon had trouble with the Hawthorn forward structure when, in terms of size, it wasn't the issue. I mean, there was Mabior Chol, and Mabior still got his 2-2 from 8. I mean, huge vote of confidence game for Mabior then, which I absolutely loved. Hawthorn just also were accurate, obviously. They kicked 17-9. Their entries were accurate. Their goal kicking was after that. Nick Watson kicking 3 straight. Dylan Moore going from the flanks of the first half to a solid inside 50 role in the second half and kicking 3 of his own then. That was a role that I loved just because it really showed his utility. And I mentioned McDonald before, just what a complete game from him. 8 marks, a goal and 2 assists for 23. I believe he had 4 intercepts as well and 7 score involvements. Just, he's one that, like, this time a year ago, we were high on, but I'm not sure a lot of other people outside the Hawthorn sphere were. Now you've got to talk about him in terms of their successes. I also want to shout out just the inclusion for Hawthorn as well. Josh Ward, the solid 22 disposal game, that there's depth on this squad. And with Ward showing that he's comfortable there in the middle, it just keeps Will Day open to go wherever he's required. Interesting thing for Hawthorn coming up, we got 3 full games of Frostball in all likelihood because Jack Scrinshaw's suspension was upheld. And yes, they have Carlton next, but I'm looking ahead to round 3 because Jesse Hogan ought to be back by then for that fascinating Saturday night game at Launceston.
See, I would have given Scrimshaw 1 game and Lynch 3. Nick Watson, not only did he have 3 goals, he also had 2 assists. His 5 score involvements were all goals. I thought Tom Barris was pretty solid overall. 12 disposals, 8 intercepts, and helped hold things down against the Essendon forwards.
He's never had to do it all on his own. He still doesn't have to do it all on his own between Battle and when Sicily's back. It's a solid by-committee group there, and that's how Hawthorn are. It's by-committee success.
There was some really shitty umpiring in this game. It did not affect the outcome. Hawthorn won this game because they played better first quarter and then kind of just held down the fort from there. But there were some pretty terrible calls. There was a deliberate rush behind that drew a lot of controversy that I didn't think was that bad. But Sam Frost should have gotten called for holding the ball during, I think it was the second quarter that was really bad. And then there was one that, like, Merritt had a kick that missed his man and went out, and it was a Hawthorn free kick, but then Jai Newcomb just yeeting a ball out of bounds. It's just a throw-in.
And that wasn't the case of, like, one of them going inside 50, I believe. Thinking about the overarching effects of this game on Hawthorn, I mean, the fact that Hawthorn were beaten in clearances and entries does say something. I don't know how much it says yet, because they were able to defend and prevent effective entries a lot of the time. But is that going to hold up against other higher quality teams? Can they get exposed a bit? Maybe against Carlton, maybe against the Giants. These next 2 weeks will be pretty telling.
Now, in the NHL, advanced stat people talk about score effects. And I'm wondering if maybe there was some of that here where basically, like, to evaluate possession stuff and shots and all of that, you look at it in tied or close situations. You look at what teams do in tied games and in 1-goal games. Once you get to a 2-goal margin, you play much more defensively. If you're protecting the lead, you're much more aggressive if you're behind. And then once it's out beyond 2 goals, it's you just throw up your hands and anything could happen. So could that have been a factor where Hawthorn was altering their game plan because of the lead they had? I'm going to say no, probably not what happened here, because it happened for most of the night. Not like this was just an end of game thing, but it's worth at least contemplating and not ruling out.
So stay tuned. See you Thursday. Geelong 23-9, 147, defeating Fremantle 10-9, 69. Say it, Ethan.
Nice.
I was the one really watching this game with undivided attention, whereas Ethan didn't in Sacramento.
Yeah, so I want to talk about 2 things. I want to talk about my experience watching the game as well as the game itself. This past weekend was the state basketball championships, state high school basketball championships. Last year was during opening round. This year was during round 1, which is why I haven't seen a whole lot of Saturday and Sunday action yet, but I was not missing this. But unfortunately, 7:20 p.m. local time start left me kind of compromised. So I am at the media seating at Golden One Center in Sacramento. Fuck Vivek Ranadive, but great arena. And the 6 p.m. basketball game was not one that had my full attention, so I was able to at least mostly watch the first quarter. And because things were a little behind schedule with long endings to games, really most of the first half, but there was a pretty important game. It was supposed to start at 8, started probably more like 8:20, 8:30, between Sierra Canyon from LA and Lincoln from Stockton. If there's a high school basketball team people in Australia have heard of, there's a good chance it's Sierra Canyon because of all of the famous people whose kids have gone to that school, including LeBron.
LeBron James.
And since he's out with a groin injury right now, he showed up to see his son Bryce play his final high school game. Now, I am not the world's biggest LeBron fan, but I gotta say, being able to say that you are in the same building as him is cool. And more than anything, I kind of compare this to seeing Messi in person, who I also have not seen actually play a game. Seen him, wave to people though. It was more cool to see people lose their shit over Messi than it was seeing Messi himself. Same deal applies here to LeBron. So probably 10 minutes before the game, warm-ups are going on, and people know that he's coming and just start flooding to the tunnel, hoping to get a glimpse of him, hoping to see him, and then just oh wait, he's coming out the other side, other tunnel, everyone run.
Other way! Imbeciles.
And that was just super funny to watch. Sierra Canyon, if you were setting a line, would have been favored by double digits, and Lincoln nearly pulled it off, got hurt by a couple bad foul calls late. That totally sucked up my attention, and with Cats up 60, that's great. And then when that lead got down to 21, things got pretty nerve-wracking. But then Tom Atkins and Shannon Neal said, go watch basketball, put the game away. I finally got to go back and digest things in full. Still kind of a tricky game to comprehend entirely, but I will say this. There was a lot of holy shit, Bailey Smith plays for my team moments, between just the cheers he got for his first disposal, the ability to play through tackles and dominate at ground level. That stands out right away, and that's something that this team just didn't have. This was a team that struggled on ground ball, center clearance stuff over the last couple of years, and to have a guy who directly addresses that is really great. Also, it's going to take a lot for my favorite moment of the season to not be our first goal, which that's hard to do. I would never go out and say that's it, stop Footy here, we don't need anything else, but it's going to be hard to exceed Brian kicking a ridiculous 45-meter ripper from the corner, or the Cats' first goal of the year. This was what I waited nearly 6 months for.
And a week longer than you expected.
Yeah, and if I was not in an arena with roughly 6,000 people, I would have really lost my shit. But instead, just like sitting there with my headphones on, pumping my fists. I do appreciate games running behind schedule because I was worried it was going to be, like important, close, late game stuff going on while I'm like trying to be part of a press conference. Because they do have like formal post-game press conferences for the state championships. A lot of high school games, it's just like pull someone aside and stick your phone in their face. Now, this is like a formal press conference. And fortunately, that was going on while game was close to over, if not completely over. And Cats really padded the margin nicely, ended up more than doubling them up.
It did not feel like that for a lot of the game. And that was even the case before Murphy Reed had his insane Murphy Reed stretch with 4 goals in 7 minutes real time, about 3 minutes on the clock. And all of a sudden, he might be the best of the 3 Reeds to be playing for a Western Australian team. Fuck.
Giving up the goal going into halftime is like, okay, whatever, we're still up 54. But once they got those first couple to start the third, like, all right, let's get the next one, let's settle down, and then the whole Murphy Reed thing. Caleb Sarong played a great third quarter, but other than that was totally held down. Frankly, Frio did not play a good first half. Like, outside of Ethan O'Driscoll on the outside and Andrew Brayshaw in the middle, they were just pretty bad. Josh Tracy missing a couple shots he shouldn't. Brennan Cox giving up, I don't know how many bad free kicks and easy giveaways and stuff. Corey Wagner, you read my mind. Corey Wagner just being a defensive liability. You're telling me that you're going to play Brennan Cox and Corey Wagner and not James Aish?
Be my guest.
Favorite thing out of this game besides Grian's goal, I think it's got to be the butt spoil.
You mean the ass smother by Johnson?
Yes.
Giggity. Big time giggity there. It would have been even more of one if it was an ass smother on Johnson, but no, it was Matt Johnson who was doing that because a Luke Jackson kick from the midfield got him right in the cheek.
He just ran right in front of him as it happened. Brandon Walker and Josh Draper weren't very good. Heath Chapman, who totally shut Jeremy Cameron down when the teams played in Perth last year, was the sub for some reason. They're missing guys. Round 1 is weird, but if this week I don't see some significant improvements from the Dockers, regardless of if they actually win, it would absolutely be time to be concerned. Because this was they look really bad outside of a couple of guys. Other Geelong stuff, let's see. O'Sheen Mullen, when I checked in on post-game live, there were people that weren't happy with him, and every time I watch him, he's frustrating because there are times when he's super quiet and you hardly notice him, but then the couple of touches he does have, it's like, whoa, look at the insane upside, and I get why the coaches still believe in him. Jeremy Cameron was pretty quiet for most of the day, ended up with 4 goals because of some of the late ones. Sam DeConing, got beat on hitouts pretty comfortably. That was to be expected, but ended up with a goal, a pretty difficult one at that. 25 disposals and was just involved all over the ground. And I was really pleasantly surprised with him. Jack Henry, outside of the third quarter, was really sharp. Max Holmes was kind of the number 2 guy to Bailey Smith, and I really liked what he had to offer. And I love Mitch Nevitt's physicality. Also, Patrick Dangerfield playing forward most of the game, and then when it was super important, dragging him into the middle, that was smart. He's never been a great set shot kicker, but he wasn't bad. Ended up 2-2 in this game. Really, there was maybe one set shot all game that we missed that I was frustrated with. There were a few times early where there was a ball on the ground and they weren't able to do much with it that could have turned into a goal. But I've had a feeling after both in the simulation and the community series, that goal kicking didn't go well. I was like, oh well, they're just saving it. And I was right. Never worry about goal kicking accuracy in the preseason unless it's from someone who had long-term issues with it and claimed they had worked on it a bunch. Also, Brad Close was good. I like Tom Stewart. I still would rather see him do more defensively. Bit of a mixed bag for Connor O'Sullivan. He should get some more chances with Jed Buse and Jake Kolajashny out, but he did get beat a few times in one-on-ones. I liked some of what he had to offer, though. And I don't know, unless you're moving Stewart back more, I think he's going to have to be out there a bunch. But I still see the upside, still a believer long-term. Mark O'Connor, only 13 disposals, but totally reasserted his place in the team after totally being in the doghouse at the end of last season. Even though his numbers weren't huge, I liked how Shannon Neal played in the forward pockets. Wait, holy shit. 4 assists? Only 9 disposals, but 4 assists. Wow. I didn't even realize that. Jeez. And I had written it down.
Okay, so that's basically the entire fucking team. If there's any one player that I think Geelong outsiders would learn about from this game, it would be Mitch Devitt. We'd been on him. He's a little bit slighter of frame than people might realize, given just how much he lowers his head and just takes on tackles and activity like that in the center square. His best quarter was the third. He was highlighted by the broadcasters after his handball to Bradley Close for a setup. And then he had a nice assist to Ollie Dempsey as well. So big fan of that.
This was an extension of what we saw from Nevitt in the preseason, and that's a very good thing.
I mean, we'd seen it in the VFL also. It's just an extension of what we've come to expect from him.
There are some guys who tear up the VFL and just aren't good enough for AFL level, and this is reassuring that he is good enough.
Geelong take a long time to develop guys because they know they can. Fremantle had their third highest halftime score conceded in the Justin Longmuir era. Their zone approach wasn't working. Mateo and the one percenters said it well, just their conservative approach is costing them on both sides of the ball. When they finally brought some pressure and were aggressive in the third quarter, they were taking advantage of open space that Geelong wingers left and being able to close in from the flanks. Given the way that Fremantle did manage to score from center bounces and attacking the midfield, I questioned a little bit of Geelong's strategy defending, with Mark O'Connor, for example, tagging Andrew Brayshaw instead of Caleb Sarong. O'Connor then, did cork something and get subbed out. So my mental jury is still out on Mark O'Connor, but it's more positive than it was. I'll say that. Fremantle's positives in the first half. We mentioned Brayshaw. I saw signs from Murphy Reed in the first half, just with the way he was moving with the ball. And then Jager O'Meara, I thought, fit in as well. I think both the O's did well enough for themselves in the middle between O'Meara and Driscoll. And Michael Frederick, I'm not sure how much love he's going to get, but we are unabashed Freddie enjoyers. He kicked 2 goals from 13 and had 2 assists as well. And he's the type of player they need because Fremantle can't just keep being conservative. They can't just keep being Fremantle. It's cost them now for multiple weeks, honestly, with going back to the preseason and the All-Stars, and we saw it coming. We didn't see through your bullshit there, Justin Longmuir. So take a cue from Freddie, Dockers.
And his role is going to have to be magnified for the foreseeable future after Sam Switkowski pulled his groin. The flow of this game kind of reminded me of, do you remember the Dogs-Dockers game last year where Bontempelli had a really nice goal and the Dogs ended up putting up like 140?
Was that the game with some really nice stuff from Harvey Gallagher as well at Marvel?
I don't recall. I just remember meeting up with one of our followers and grabbing a couple of drinks and then going home and watching the game after the fact. Derek Stata, not to be confused with Derek, who we had on as a guest. This is Derek, who lives in Australia.
By that point, I was already down in San Diego, no wonder. But I get it in terms of like margin quickly worked out and then just piling it on late as well. The middle Saturday games, Sydney Swans 12-10-82, defeated by the Brisbane Lions 12-14-86. This was Andrew Gigach's first chance to do the winning by blank behinds tweet for the year. Not the cleanest played game in the shortest time span ever between a grand final and a rematch in VFL AFL history, by the way. But an entertaining game and one that reminded me more of the round 19 meeting last year, the Gamma, than the grand final. And I was thankful for that.
We are entering the phase of the show where I'm just going to keep asking Benjamin what happened. I didn't see it. All I saw and all I know out of this game was I saw the very last goal where Isaac Heaney cut it to 5. I saw a behind after that. It cut it to 4. And that was really the last chance. I know that Lachie Neal had a very quiet game. I know that the Ashcroft brothers were good. I know that Charlie Cameron didn't play. I know that Justin McInerney's getting suspended 3 games, and CZ jumped out to a big early lead. That's like pretty much everything I know. So you can take it from here.
Okay, well, Charlie Cameron was a calf issue that forced him to be a late change. Initially, Levi Ashcroft was going to be the sub on debut. Instead, on short notice, he got into the 22, and that was great. He fit in right away because he's an Ashcroft, and that's what Ashcrofts do. But Charlie Cameron being out wasn't the only problem for Brisbane in terms of a small forward look. You know, when Cameron was out, my thought was, all right, they still got Kai Lohman. And then very quickly, they didn't have Kai Lohman.
I did see he was on crutches, and I knew he got hurt.
A left ankle injury for him, but it might only be 1 to 2 weeks, so he could be back in time to face Geelong round 3.
Kai, if you're listening to this, I want you to focus on your long-term health instead of try to rush back. Please give yourself 2 weeks. You deserve the rest. And then come back and play super hard and keep being really good at footy. And then maybe also take like 1 game off later in the season, just a random one. I don't know, maybe, how about round 15? That way you can kind of give yourself a double bye and really rejuvenate yourself for the second half of the season.
You see, double buys, I'm not a huge fan. It can take it too much out of your rhythm.
I mean, if it's an older guy, I actually do like it.
Kai Lohman ain't old. I mean, I believe I am older than Kai Lohman. I am by nearly 3 years. Holy cow. In the reverse of last year, it was Sydney that started hot. Remember how the Swans had so many of those first quarter troubles last year? Not in this one. Their tackle pressure was an early positive. Braden Campbell kept playing forward. Actually, there were 2 smaller left-footed forward figures that I liked in him and Corey Warner. Much more than just Chad's brother. Good starts for both of them. There was worry that the Lions were actually going to lose another player because Logan Morris had a head clash with Zach Bailey. Morris stayed in. He had a key moment later. Bailey was the one that really stepped up, though. If you're wondering, okay, how did Brisbane make do on the smaller attacking side? The answers were Zach Bailey and Dane Zorko, with a helping not in terms of goals, but in terms of structure, honestly, from Connor McKenna, surprisingly enough. We know what Bailey can do as a small forward. He's kicked 30-plus goals in a season before. Zorko's just a threat anywhere. It's amazing the condition that he's still in, and he had a couple key goals, was a part of the small forward solution in the fourth quarter in particular. McKenna just occupied that space, though, which was important, and he had a couple assists.
It's funny, last year, Bailey was pretty quiet, and, you know, there were a bunch of games where like, oh man, it's going to happen. Zach Bailey's going to do it. Here we go.
He had an unremarkable home and away, and then he was a big part of what worked on the wing for Brisbane in the finals. I think that maybe goes a bit underreported because small forward was figured out between Cameron and him starting to pass the torch to Lohman. But it's good to see that he still got the small forward form, and the 4 goals on Saturday left nothing in doubt.
Yeah, that's, if you want to figure out like, hey, where could the Lions be better this year than they were last year? Zach Bailey's a good place to start.
I like him on the wing, but knowing that he has the small forward utility still is really important. When the Lions got into the game in the second quarter and brought their better pressure, they were looking to bring things back into the corner. And it ended up being that both teams were sending their extra half forwards into the stoppages. What ended up working for the Lions was Oscar McInerney being superior, gave the upper hand in the ruck. And then Darcy Wilmot was one of the Lions' most important players in the middle quarters with his speed and his long and accurate kicking ability. For a while, though, players were managing to get the space, but the kicking wasn't good enough outside of a few players. That's why I said this game felt a bit sloppier than I expected. Yes, it was hot. Was the ball really that slick with all the sweat? I really don't know, because it stayed pretty fast-paced until the Swans tried to slow things down in the fourth quarter, at which point they were already trying to come back, which was interesting that they thought, okay, we got to be more deliberate. We've got the time to come back. We just need to be more secure with our movement. And that ended up really never happening. They never grabbed the lead in the fourth quarter, but I think it was the right approach. Levi Ashcroft really stepped up with 10 disposals in the fourth quarter. And then the Lions winning with Lachie Neale being as quiet as he was is another testament to this team's depth. Lachie Neale was reduced to 10 disposals because of a good James Jordan tag. Those were his fewest disposals in any game as a Brisbane Lion, and they won anyway.
Jordan's tag was really good in the second half. last week against Will Day, so I guess that's not a huge surprise.
But we've seen Hawthorn win without Will Day. It's been tougher for Brisbane to win without Lachie Neale.
Oh, no, I was just talking about like the effectiveness of the tag itself.
Oh, of course, yeah. But when you've got 2 Ashcrofts in there, as well as a super physical and functional game from Josh Dunkley, then you still got enough avenues there. Dunkley with 10 tackles and 6 clearances as part of a 27 disposal effort. He got a somewhat rarer goal as well because he's usually very much a defensive midfield, had to do a bit more overall in this game at the source. And Jared Berry, how about 10 marks? There is one thing for the Lions lineup that may change, honestly. Starting next week, we'll see how long the bereavement process takes for Sam Day because his dad died during the week. And so that's why he didn't play in that full forward spot. Instead, it was Premiership player Darcy Ford, who did kick a goal. Good on Ford for that. But I'd still like to see Day in that spot. But hey, they won.
Can I get a vibe check on the Swans? How are you feeling about them? 0-2, 2 losses at home, but 2 very good teams, and obviously they're missing pieces. What's your feeling like?
You've seen the younger pieces emerge and have responsibility earlier than they have a lot of the time in recent years. That's good. Yes, 0-2, but growing pains under a new coach and tight loss this past week. I'm still unsure of some parts of the defensive look. Ben Patton should not be seeing an AFL Oval anytime soon. He actually was subbed out of this game. Sam Wicks has a bit to learn still. I think he will fit in defense overall, but still has a bit too much that midfield instinct committing toward the ball rather than his direct defensive opponent. That mattered some in the third quarter with some goals by Dane Sorko and Zach Bailey. Size-wise, it might not always be the best as well, but again, there were going to be reinforcements on the way. Callum Mills will be coming back, hopefully sooner rather than later. I know plantar fasciitis is a bitch, though. And I liked what Tom Hanley and Riley Bice showed in their second and first games, respectively. Bice fit in all the overlaps right away once he was inserted as the substitute. And Hanley got his first goal. You said that for Sydney, just getting toward the buys around 500 you thought would be a good sign. Look at their schedule, though. That's a tough road trip coming up. This is a pretty brutal start to the season. And I mean, it's a brutal schedule as a whole for runners-up. So can they learn from their mistakes? Can they learn about monitoring the tempo a little bit more? And can they stick it to a Fremantle team that's definitely going to be seeking bigger answers than they are?
That's the round finale, right?
That is the round 2 finale out west.
Oh, we actually have like a banger to close around, or like what feels like a really high stakes game. Awesome.
And not just that, I believe that's going to be on Fox Sports 1.
Hell yeah.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did. How did you know that number, Ethan? Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters. Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed. It's so easy you can edit it while drunk. And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do. Best of all, it's completely free. Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Welcome back to episode, I have to check the number, that's how long we've been doing this, 229 of Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Ethan Castle. Find me on Twitter at Castle Media.
That is Castle with a K, as could be implied by Twitter handle, which is BenjaminHK01. You still might type the C. Collectively, we are at Americans Footy on a host of social media platforms and not TikTok. Thank you very much. Hope to be more active with YouTube Shorts. Maybe we could post like our weekly awards winners there with some small highlights. And Brian Harambe, Ethan's son, and our executive producer, is on Instagram at cat named Brian.
I actually have an update about him. I finally got him a laser pointer. I was given one for him a few years ago and lost it immediately. And it's so far been very entertaining to have him play with it. Basically, the first couple minutes, he'll go nuts chasing it around. And then after that, he kind of like, he'll stay captivated by it. Like he'll stare at it, his tail will go nuts, but he'll mostly just sit there.
But he's also smart enough to know where the light is coming from.
Yes, within the first like hour, I was using it and he like walked over and like slapped the laser pointer itself. And lately he's been like rubbing up against it, knowing like, this is mine, this is my thing. It just proves like he's really smart. Yet he's also simultaneously fascinated by light.
Fascinating by the light. Nah, Manfred Mann and Bruce Springsteen rejected that title.
So as I said, the second half of this show is going to be a lot of Benjamin explaining stuff and then me asking like, what happened here? So let's kind of get into that phase of the show right now, I guess, because again, haven't watched a lot of these things yet, especially the Sunday games. I have watched zero other than like a couple of highlight clips.
Well, when it comes to the Saturday night overlap, though, there was one game that you did watch and one game that I watched instead. Your game was more entertaining, so we'll start with mine, obviously. Collingwood 21-10, 136, defeating Port Adelaide 6-9-45. Dan Houston's first game against Port, and just because Collingwood gets favorable scheduling, they don't have to play Port in Adelaide. This is another one, like Hawthorn-Essendon, where the first goal went the visiting team's way, and then very quickly it went the host's way.
Obviously, not having Zach Butters right now doesn't help Port, but like nobody was expecting it to be this bad.
I mean, it wasn't fun last year either when they met. None of Port's recent trips to play Collingwood at the G have been fun or good for them. Collingwood were finding space and kicking into space really easily, and Port did not seem well organized. They kept fumbling a lot in defense, and just the personnel always seemed kind of off as well. Even when they had the time to switch matchups, I don't think they were really satisfied with how things were arranged. And yeah, it doesn't help when you're missing Brandon Zerk-Thatcher and Asava Radagole, and basically Alir is on his own, aside from still makeshift defender Jeremy Finlayson, who I didn't like much in this game, even though he had big numbers.
So maybe flip Finlayson and Lukosius moving forward?
That's tough because I like what Lukosius offers in the forward half. I think it depends more on the timelines for some of those defenders. We'll see how much Radagole could do if he's back this next week. But that is a card that you could pull mid-game with Lukosius, so that's nice. Lukosius was the one who had the first goal of the game, just 44 seconds in. Yeah, a bit of a quiet spell after that for him and for Port as a whole, while the 3Ms did well. The triple Ms, I think, is how they're being called, which is appropriate for a Melbourne team. McStay, Membry, Myercheck. Membry had 3 in the first quarter, which just was awesome for somebody who's a huge Membry believer and feels like 15 teams were done to not look at him. There was an article that said that Carlton and Essendon had also kicked the tires.
I mean, I think there are teams like Geelong that, it's like, all right, where are you going to get him in there?
Who I thought was the most obvious pick other than the Saints, just to keep him.
Remind me.
Brisbane.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
I'm not sure if he would have been up for an interstate move at age 30, but I thought he would have fit Brisbane's approach really well in that void that Danaher left. Instead, he kicked 3 goals in the first quarter, ended up with 4 for the game, plus 2 assists. Myercheck and McStay kicked 3 each against that compromised Port back unit, and by themselves, those 3 did enough to easily beat the Power.
What was good for Port?
I think there were a couple polished turd candidates, Travis Boak kicking 1-1 from 28, and Connor Rosie being the main resistance at the source with 35 and 5 clearances and an assist. Those 2 did the best they could, really against the tide, and Jordan Sweet had the ruck numbers, but it didn't really end up mattering when they were so outdone in most other ways. Collingwood were plus 17 inside 50s. It didn't even feel like Port were plus 3 in clearances for the game just because they weren't clean with it. They also didn't punish turnovers in their half nearly enough, whereas Collingwood did. And then Willem Drew, tried tagging Nick Dacos, and that didn't end up working. That ended up being broken by halftime. Collingwood ran him off the turf. They subverted expectations after looking slow in opening round by playing at speed, bringing pressure, They had 39 tackles in the entire opening round game against the Giants. They had 38 by halftime and ended up with 69.
Nice.
Even when the game was very clearly decided for pretty much all of the second half, they were also +9 on tackles inside 50.
I'm looking at your notes, and I'm assuming just by the margin and how this game had been going, just looking at the running score, was it as bad as the score suggests?
At times, it really was. I had trouble keeping interest in this game a decent amount. Things that kept me interested, seeing that a seagull pooped on Brad Johnson's suit jacket at halftime, and him having like a stormtrooper helmet on in the third quarter. Braden Maynard having his second career multi-goal game because he kicked 2 goals in a row in the third.
Was that like off of 50 or something? Or
No.
man, they were really just playing with their food then. Wow.
Yeah. And they were converting just at a very, very high rate as well. From their first 14 inside 50s of the third quarter, they kicked 6 goals. Just a frustrating watch report, knowing what this season ought to mean to them. Yes, you knew that they were going to be up against it with the outs they had, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad at all. The only forward who it felt like was really competing and with it for Port throughout the game was Willie Rioli. His touches were the best of them. Just took the proper angles inside 50, but when your opponents score 10 goals in a row, and the only reason that's broken is because there's a questionable sliding mark that gets paid to your 200 gamer, then it's going to be really damn hard to find the positives.
Well, I guess this combination of results successfully put some intrigue on the Port Richmond game this week. Like, Port are going to be playing kind of desperate.
And Richmond with house money and then some, like 16 houses money. I did think Pat Lipinski was much better on a per touch basis in this game. He had a goal and an assist off 24 and 8 marks. And Lipinski's one who is going to need to step up, and it is a per touch thing for him. Dan Houston, Collingwood debut, 27 and 5 tackles. Long kicking we knew would be there. He was denied an opportunity for a goal when there was something with a lack of an advantage, I think, in the fourth quarter, but Collingwood played with their food. Western Bulldogs, 17-11-113, defeating North Melbourne, 14-13-97. This game did not start off interesting, 5-1 in the first quarter, and then it did get interesting. It was just a 7-point margin at three-quarter time before the Bulldogs got the first 3 goals of the last, and won relatively comfortably from there.
This was a fun watch. So Ed Richards picked up right where he left off last year. There were a bunch of sequences where he would like assist in the center clearance via handball, then end up kicking it into the forward 50. He was phenomenal, and I think the stat line really helps explain that. Everything except for marks and tackles, basically. Goal off 30 disposals, 11 score involvements, 7 clearances, and 4 assists. He was tremendous. And it was just like, it was pretty consistent throughout the entire game. Not such an impressive stat line, 12 disposals, but I was so impressed with Sam Darcy. The way he impacted the game in both 50s. Like, this is the guy we knew he was capable of being, and now it's actually happening, and that's super cool. I think kind of the overall theme here is that because of the players they were forced to play and how limited they were in terms of selection, like the Bulldogs actually had to play a lot of these and it worked really well. Whether that be Harvey Gallagher, who I really like. I know he's not quite one of the young guys, but loved what I saw out of Latham Vandermeer. I think he was probably the best forward in this game. Like Aaron Naughton was very good, but like Cody Waitman, you're not going to find a like-for-like replacement. But Vandermeer was a really quality, high-energy piece who created opportunities for himself and for his teammates. 16 disposals, 10 contested possessions, 3 goals, and 2 assists. So that helps soften the blow a lot. James Harms, probably his best game in a Bulldog uniform so far. I mean, that's kind of a low bar to clear because he was pretty disappointing and not in there all the time last year. I didn't even recognize him at first with the longer hair, but he had a goal, 16 disposals, 2 assists, played really well on the outside. And then as the game went on, you could really see Matthew Kennedy settle in. he pulled second to only Richards in the coaches' votes, 4 assists out of his performance.
Richards with the perfect 10 seems like a no-brainer. We knew that Ed Richards could do this, and the responsibility is squarely on him, with Bontempelli and Treloar being out and Liberatore being old. Now, Lima did have his share in for a lot of this game as well, with 28 and 15 contested, but the point is, that's got to be the tandem in there right now, and it was with Kennedy supporting. So, in that respect, that worked out extremely well for the Bulldogs, and yeah, I was wondering what the deal was going to be up front. I like Riley West, but it was a quieter game from him. And he's someone that I like more of as a defensive forward as well, even though he set a career high mark for goals last year. So great for Vanderby, who I've always highlighted for his versatility, to actually get that forward time and make good on it.
Joel Frazier was another one who impressed me more and more as the game went on. And the Bulldogs still did do one very silly Bulldog thing. With more than half of the fourth quarter remaining, they were down to 7 interchanges.
Oh, what a fook.
And they used their last one with 4:21 still on the clock. And fortunately for them, they were up comfortably enough that it really didn't matter at that point. You know, North did cut it back to 15, but there were only 2:03 left. It could have gotten it down to 9, but Cam Zurhar cut in front of Nick Larkey to mark when he should have just let Larkey have it, and then he missed everything. Larkey kicked 5-1, only had 8 disposals, but 9 score involvements, whereas Zurhar went 1-4 and had that miss.
Okay, hold up.
Hold up.
I don't think I've ever before seen a stat line where somebody has more score involvements than they do disposals. So I think the only way that could have happened would have been like a tap on or something. He does get minimal ruck time there in the forward 50, so things could always originate from that, or it could just be something that's tapped on during freer play. I think that has to be the way.
Yeah, I believe it was trying to find I don't think I noted, but there was definitely a play that he like tapped on where he didn't like necessarily have a full disposal out of it, but involved himself in the play. It's like, you know, when you have a higher batting average than on-base percentage. That's a sacrifice flies and bunts can do that. With perspective, first quarter wasn't great, but they got themselves back into this game. Again, they were like within 7 on a few occasions. They were legitimately involved in this game. And I think you want to boil down to just why did they lose? Simply put, they're not good enough to be able to afford a down game from Charlie Combin, who needs to be their top defender.
I think that, but also just getting themselves in too big a hole early also is like the other factor there. We haven't seen this team yet get into an early hole and then really respond from it. I mean, maybe they did that like once against the Eagles, but like against actual fucking competition.
And then just a few like derpy mistakes and turnovers. You know, whether that be things like Zurhar's misses, a couple of giveaways that led to goals, like Zurhar hitting the post after being gifted an opportunity off of a bad Liva turnover. Stuff like that were just like, they have to create their own luck. They're not good enough to get away with mistakes like that. But I did see a lot of positives. First off, Finn O'Sullivan. I really liked the way they kind of let him control play from the back. Colby McKercher was definitely more involved towards the middle than he was last year. Harry Sheasel managed to have what I consider to be a pretty quiet 31.
The fact that you mentioned those 3 in that order, though, I think that must have been very purposeful for you, because there's a progression there from letting the new guy control the back. We saw that from North with Sheasel and then McKercher, and then working them into the middle more. And yeah, Sheasel, even though he did get on the score sheet with a couple behinds, didn't really like stand out to me as just, oh, he's getting a lot of the ball. My attention was elsewhere.
Like, the difference between Sheasel and McKercher in those roles before and O'Sullivan in it now is, first off, O'Sullivan doesn't look like he's just racking up empty possessions. He's kind of shaping those attacks from the back. I think this is actually like a perfect role for him. You know, have him be the one that kind of orchestrates the attacks from the rear. That might end up being his long-term home, even though I know he's listed as a midfielder, and I'm sure they'll like him in contests. I think just he sees the game from the back with the vision of a veteran.
Didn't we also say that about Sheasel a couple years back?
Yes, But with Sheasel, you also would see a couple of those like party trick handballs and stuff every game. They're just like, whoa, why are we using the Mona Lisa as a placemat?
Polished turret candidate, is that pretty clear?
I think it's Luke Davies-Uniacke. I think he was just really sharp in the midfield altogether. You could argue that he was the best midfielder, period, other than Richards. Did like Jai Simpkin. Nice to see him healthy. Hopefully he stays that way. That would be really cool. Tom Powell had a few moments. Bailey Scott had a couple. I actually did like Jack Darling largely. Just now you have a second haul that Larky can play off. He can jump in and do some backup ruck duties. So I like that out of him, but holy fuck, he's slow. My God.
And it's not like he's a completely redeemable player in other qualities either. It makes me think of how this past week when I was watching a hockey game between the Anaheim Ducks and the Washington Capitals, you're okay with Alex Ovechkin being one of the slower skaters out there because he's still got a deadly shot and good playmaking abilities too. I saw him get 3 assists actually, but no goals, which was kind of rare. But Darling is no Ovechkin.
I really noticed it mid-second quarter in particular, where he was like, what? He moves decently well at times, but when he has the ball, oh my God, he's slow. But he managed to still set up a goal out of this one. He hit Cam Zurhaar, and then O'Donnell held Larky, and Larky got his third. Rory Lobb did all right with Larky. James O'Donnell less so. O'Donnell ended up getting subbed out after hurting his jaw, kind of colliding with Paul Curtis.
Yeah, he broke that.
So I don't know what the solution is going to be there for the next couple of weeks, especially as long as Liam Jones is out.
And also with Luke Cleary being out concussed.
And the thing with Jones, I like him much more roving than I do in one-on-one. So I don't know who's supposed to be like a real shutdown defender here. Jones could be back in the next 1 to 3 weeks. Maybe you throw Buku Kamas in there, but he still could add some more muscle. Also, one of the more confusing things was like, why is Riley Garcia not in the team? He's got a knee injury. So that one makes sense.
There we go.
One other North thing, this was better played from Luke McDonald than I've seen in quite some time. I liked him moving the ball. He only had like 1 or 2 derps. Way better than seeing him in one-on-ones. If you're going to lose games if you're North, it kept you engaged. They didn't break your heart. It was worth watching. And there are signs of encouragement.
And Jackson Archer is suspended 3 games because of a flawed match review system. This is the common thread continuing here because, that's just how it is. If you concuss somebody, it's either no games or 3. And Archer made it clear that he was wanting to tackle Luke Cleary rather than go for the ball himself, which did him in. After seeing the reasons that the tribunal gave, I get why the suspension was made. I don't like the fact that it's just automatically 3 games, though, when the intent was not there. Tom Lynch.
Yeah, it's and stuff like this is also why I would love to see tribunal things televised. I would love to see Jackson Archer admitting, I was going for the tackle, and seeing the entire North legal team facepalm in unison.
I remember messaging Max Lawton about the idea of us watching Tribunal Tuesday with him and Zeets. It is man, it's really not anything interesting. At least I want to get schnitz with y'all.
It's most of the time, that's a place that I need to include on my list of things to do when in Australia.
And it has to be on a Tuesday night.
And it seems like one of those things, a little like test cricket, where it can be super boring for a while and all of a sudden something really exciting happens.
And now we get into Sunday.
You know how much of Sunday's games I've seen?
Minutes.
Couple of clips.
Well, you didn't miss much for 2 of the games. And one of those...
I have questions. I'm kind of fascinated by 2 of the 3.
And the one you aren't is the Eagles getting walloped.
Yeah, I'm surprised it was that bad, but I'll ask about how they looked, what they did structurally that's different. But so Saturday was the second day of the state basketball championships. Gilbert Arenas' kid played, his team lost. And then Braden Burries, he should be getting the crowds that people who have LeBron's DNA inside them are getting, because this guy is fucking ridiculous. He scored 44 of his team's 80. He had 27 in the first half. is not committed to a college yet, but he's really good. And while it is pretty cool to say, I saw LeBron's kid play, Braden Burries is one of the 2 best players in the state of California. The other is Tunde.
Oh, Tunde Yesufu, of course. Baylor commit, yes?
Yes. He should be the first NBA player from Benin. Also, this time next year, there's a good chance you'll be watching both Braden Burries and Tunde Yesufu in the tournament. I know Australians love the NBA, but I hope you guys appreciate March Madness. I also love talking college football with John Roberts because that's Sunday in Australia. It's hard to watch the NFL games that are on your Monday morning. So I hope you guys can appreciate the NCAA tournament and how amazing it is and how fun and ridiculous college basketball is altogether.
Your mid-major / minor conference darling team this year is UC San Diego.
Also Omaha, because they're in a 14 pod with 3 very famous coaches, and then here's the guys who smash trash cans after every win. And there's a fair amount of Australian players, plus some Americans and players their way to the NBL. I think it's really cool that Tyler Harvey's one of the better players in the NBL.
Oh yeah, if you want to support Australians, it's simple. Just St. Mary's.
Even though lately they've gotten less Australia heavy and much more Lithuanian.
I mean, it helps that one of their current Lithuanian players is the son of an NBA player.
USF currently has 1 Australian player who is actually named James O'Donnell, but from Sydney, so less likely to be a Footy fan. But yes, college basketball definitely has more Australian players altogether than the NBA. And, a few such as Matthew Owies that end up making their way back to Footy. Well, I don't think Alex Condon's ever going to play for Collingwood.
No, he might win a national championship first.
And I had a brief text exchange with his coach, actually.
Todd Golden.
Very brief. It was just congrats on what's already been an amazing season. Here's to a deep tournament run. Thank you, E. But,
Did you say hope to see you in San Francisco?
Nope. But I get to go occasionally talk with the head coach of one of the 4 1 seeds. So that's pretty cool.
My bracket has Florida losing the national championship game.
To
another Jewish head coach.
Auburn?
The other.
Ah.
Anyway, Ethan didn't watch much of the Sunday games because those started during the Saturday night championship games, which included the top division, the open division for both men and women.
And yeah, that's where Braden Burries did his thing. I mean, this guy is ridiculous.
And also Cal commit for the women's side, Puff Morris from Etowanda.
Adelaide 21-9, 135 defeated St. Kilda 10-12-72. I'm looking at the quarter scores right now, and I know you liked Adelaide's forward line a lot, which, that kind of fits if they scored 135, but St. Kilda giving up 44 in the first quarter. That seems just
out of territory.
Yeah. But what the hell happened?
I think they were getting too cued and going too short in the back. Umpires have really cracked down on mark distance to start this year, and there were a couple not 15 decisions that burned them and resulted in 2 early goals against. Yes, the Crows' pressure was good, but I just thought the Saints looked indecisive and had trouble pressing up towards the contest, which also meant Adelaide had an easier time getting numbers out the back and getting easier connections with those taller guys. You had all 3 of their trade period players get their first goals, Isaac Cumming, James Peatling, and Alex Neal-Bullen. And yeah, you have that FT Dubs trio there of talls. Darcy Fogarty, Riley Philthorpe, and Taylor Walker, who was subbed out in the middle of the third quarter because the game was already well decided by then. And there's going to be so much talk. Oh no, Taylor Walker was subbed out. He's not in the best 20. Shut the fuck up, Kane Corns. Look at how the game was. You had no need to play him. They were fine. You got a decent amount of time into Sid Draper. Tech still has an important role to play. Had a couple good pickups as well. This is still going to be fine for Tex in the long run.
And when their forward line's bad, you can just flip it around as WTF. Obviously, if you're kicking 21-9, you're probably outperforming your expected score, but St. Kilda really bad defensively.
Again, indecision there. And because they were trying to press up so much, it meant that on rebounds, they were able to get back a lot. Their individual positive players for me were not any real defensive players outside Nazaya Wanganeen-Miller, and we know about Nazaya already. He's just an overall versatile player that can stretch over the full field. By the way, he's a South Australia native, and he is out of contract. Positives otherwise for the Saints. Max Hall got early touches and eventually goals on his debut. He looks younger than 22, which means I think the tattoos on him look really out of place.
I mean, I've seen like 2 tatted up high school freshmen in my life. Yeah, if I had to guess, I would guess he's like a little younger, but around 20-ish. Just looking at his profile photo, he looks not that much younger, but then there's a photo lower on the page where he does look younger. Okay, I get where you're coming from.
And then we knew what Darcy Wilson would bring after the way he started off things last year. More of a flank role for him this time. That ought to continue. And Harry Boyd did all right for his first game, getting more of the ruck split than Rowan Marshall. And that's interesting to me.
I like the idea of getting Marshall at forward time.
I just wasn't sure if it was going to happen, especially when Marshall was listed as the main ruck. But no, Boyd was there taking it from the first bounce.
I haven't checked for like Fox Footy's grades from this round, but I'm guessing Saints are getting an F. Okay, Saints get a D, Crows get an A+.
Where do the positives come from that give them a D still? Is it just Nazaya exists?
Also, B- for Essendon seems a little high. They gave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 A+. GWS gets an A-. Talk about them in a bit.
You know what I will say? I was surprised that I didn't mention Jack McRae, because maybe I just take him as a given because I know what he's capable of from his time at the Dogs, but
The Dogs didn't know what he was capable of.
Fair enough, but 34 disposals, 23 contested, and 12 clearances. Those were all game highs. But I think the reason why also we can't entirely go doom and gloom on the Saints yet is because of all the players that they are without. Up front, it was no Sharman, no King. In the back, no Howard. Also, no Liam Henry in there. And he was one of their more dynamic players last year when they were going.
Did Wilkie struggle?
Wilkie still got 10 marks, 8 of those in the second half. I think the reason that happened was just a little bit of a defensive change to make sure that the Saints did keep some numbers back. But overall, they struggled with the volume.
Who is your pick for polished turd?
I'm between Nazaya and Jack McRae.
I'm pleasantly surprised to see nearly 43,000 at this game. Pretty good atmosphere.
Yeah, pretty good. Look, it's a home opener. It was decent weather there.
They also don't have Formula One right down the street.
Maybe a little too early for the transition, but yes.
Well, I mean, we could have referred to it way back in the first game because Pierre Gasly was wearing a Carlton hat. Sounds like it was actually a pretty good race.
Unfortunately, Piastri spun out and ruined a potential Australian victory. The fact that Pierre Gasly was wearing a Carlton hat should have been a sign that he wasn't going to get any points. Adelaide as a whole, they got possession chains that the Saints couldn't. Their pressure was better right away, and that shouldn't be a surprise when 2 of the guys that you traded for are really good in bringing that, those being James Peatling and Alex Neil-Bullen. Neil-Bullen brings more maturity in the midfield, while Peatling brings more of the grunt work. I saw he and Jake Saligo as being somewhat similar, which is a good thing, but Peatling obviously having more full over utility in terms of being able to have some forward time as well, a better mark. And then Jordan Dawson still being able to stretch the field a decent amount. He was tagged by Marcus Windhager, but was able to break that sometimes by pushing forward. And we have to talk about Riley Philthorpe, because Riley Philthorpe, yes, he was part of that forward triumvirate, but showed his full skill set as well with a couple assists and good handballs. So very good first report for the Crows. Now they got to take it on the road, which has been a struggle for them. However, it is against Essendon.
I see that Dawson started the game at half forward. Did he stick in that?
He often played just off the center square, as you'd expect.
Okay, so did you have any sort of like Dawson to Neil-Bullen chains? Because I'm envisioning Dawson just off the center square and back, Neil-Bullen towards the front of the center square, and those two linking up together and fitting together well. Did that happen at all?
Not really in this game, honestly. Dawson was more about the longer deliveries after those center contests, but I like your idea, and I hope Matthew Nix actually goes somewhere like that. Melbourne 11-8-74, defeated by GWS 11-11-77. This was right up against F1, and the weather wasn't great, and that's why this had the lowest attendance of the highest attended round in AFL history.
It's amazing that this ended up being the highest attended round when none of the individual games were like, into the high 80s or something.
Nothing even got to 81,000.
Yeah. And had like not even 26,000 at Geelong. That was one of the few things I was really disappointed with. But I took GWS to win this game by more than 3.5. And it was Melbourne 11-8-74, defeated by GWS 11-11-77.
The last 3 head-to-head meetings between these teams have all been Giants wins by 3 or fewer points.
I asked you this as the game was going on with Melbourne leading. I'm assuming, even with the final result, a lot had to go right for Melbourne and a lot had to go wrong for GWS. So what were those things? And tell me how should I feel about each of these teams after this, Well,
firstly, I just can't get over the fact that Lockie Keefe had the game-winning goal.
And was he the main ruckman again?
He was. And actually, the second ruck for a decent part of the game was a guy who's actually a forward.
Callum Brown?
Callum Brown, because Max Krzyzewski was the sub.
I mean, I would rather try, Aaron Cadman or some shit in that spot.
Yeah, that felt strange.
Callum Brown's not the sort of build to do that.
But here's the weird thing. I didn't like Melbourne's second ruck pick either. That was Aiden Johnson on debut. Now, he's going to be suspended because of a dangerous tackle on Callum Brown, and I think that's a decent thing for Melbourne, even though Johnson did get his first goal, all that. I think that the way they used Johnson really marginalized Jacob Van Rooyen's game, where he hardly got involved other than a goal. You need to see Van Rooyen over the full field. We've seen his marking. We've seen his field kicking be all right. That's what you need. Melbourne still need to figure out, how can, obviously Gaughan's going to play his full game, but how can Van Rooyen still do that? How can Matt Jefferson still do that? He got an instant goal and looks like another good longer-term forward development for Melbourne. How can all that work while they don't get in each other's way?
See, this kind of throws me back to the Carlton game, where it was why isn't Mackay in the ruck more? Force the issue, get him involved around the field. And yeah, I guess off of that, I like the idea of Van Rooyen getting in there, even though I like him as just a true forward. If the game isn't coming to him, then you can just kind of insert him into the game that way.
And Simon Goodwin did do that. But there were a lot of things that did work for Melbourne. Good inside run for Harry Sharp, when we know that he could do that on the outside. I mentioned Matt Jefferson, a good start. He had a goal and involvement in another, just a good tall presence there. Just the communication still needs to be ironed out. Xavier Lindsay, hell of a midfielder off not even a full preseason because of a PCL injury. Really smooth, inside and out there. And he'll have a bit more magnified role probably with Caleb Windsor being out this week with an infection in his foot, unfortunately. Maybe that'll also allow Harvey Langford to get his first full game. It was an understated, important midfield role for Tom Sparrow as well. Melbourne in the second half, I think, had the superior pressure for a decent amount of it. But as the game wore on, they wore down. You could tell the Giants were, in a lot of respects, the more experienced team, especially in the midfield of the fourth quarter. And what's the best card that Adam Kingsley can pull in terms of the Giants midfield? Yeah, you can throw Toby Green in there. Brilliant fourth quarter for him. 11 disposals, 7 contested, 4 clearances, 4 score involvements, scoring 1-1, and being the real difference maker there. Along with, of course, for the second week in a row, Finn Callahan. The fact that Kingsley has finally released Callahan to do his job on the inside as well just makes me so damn happy, because it felt obvious. Important pressure acts. When the Giants actually got some outlets for the tsunami in the fourth quarter, Callahan was a catalyst for that. And on the winning sequence, Callahan beat debutant Jack Henderson to the ball and had this headlong handball to Stephen Canelio to keep things going. He's just yes, this is what I've expected from you. And I like both these teams too. Like I had a hard time, like no one just like, oh man, like what should I be excited for this game? Fuck it, am I excited for absolutely everything?
¿Por qué no las dos?
Yeah, I kind of am.
You know, I already liked Callahan's kind of like Hayden Youngish ability to make some of the longer kicks and stretch the field. But man, if he's doing that and playing the physical stuff up the gut, that's terrifying. How did he kind of like, how did Tom Green fit back in?
It felt like a very typical Tom Green game, honestly, where the impact was center square and forward of that. And in rainy conditions, that suited his game pretty well too. He finished with 1 goal, 1 from 35.
I take it this was a pretty captivating and fun game.
It was, yeah. Seeing the Melbourne midfield triumvirate back as well, seeing Petrarca being as dynamic as he is, going forward and bringing the attention with him there and getting a couple goals, just like, oh man, the crowd, it felt like there was a lot more than 20-odd thousand there when Petrarca had his moments, when Oliver had a long goal, when each of the debutants had their goals. Like the vibes were good at this game, even with the small crowd. But when the fourth quarter came, you could tell which team was more experienced and which one had the ability to work through the troubles in fourth quarters from experience last year blowing leads, obviously. The injury concern for the Giants side of this game is that Brent Daniels was subbed out with a hip pointer. Thankfully, though, the Giants have a bye here in round 2. And what do they have after that?
A massive showdown with Hawthorn on what's on paper a pretty insane Saturday night overlap.
That in Launceston, plus the Lions and Cats postponed game. This doesn't seem as crazy as like Pendlebury's 400 against Carlton up against Sydney versus Port Adelaide, but which of those games is going to be the absolute blowout?
That's by a cajillion.
I thought you were going to say Hawks by 11, because remember, a mistake plus 11 gets you home by 7.
Last game of the round, I'm assuming this was just going off the numbers here. Our expectations were low for you, but holy fuck.
Congratulations to the Gold Coast Suns for notching their 3rd consecutive road win in home and away play, and their largest ever margin of victory at 87 points.
The mighty Sun.
West Coast Eagles 7-7-49 defeated by the Gold Coast Suns 20-16-136. Even though it was only a 16-point margin at quarter time, the vibes were very clear. The Suns were going to run away with this.
What the hell happened? I know Harley Reid only had like 4 disposals in the first half.
Yeah, and then was talking a bunch to the Suns players, like pointing them away, just like, no, you're probably the one that had him roasted. He did have a longer goal in the third quarter, but like need a more complete game out of him. And just the Eagles had clearance worries from the start. Gold Coast stoppage dominance met repeat entries. The Eagles, remember defending now without Tom Barris, were always on the back foot. Ribbon Jinby and Jack Hutchinson, this will be a valuable experience for both of them, just learning how they need to help their defenders as extra guys into contests. But with the repeated entries, things were going to crack, and they did. Ben King with 6 goals, Ben Long with 4, Jake Rogers with 3.
So is Ben King your Coleman Medal leader through round 1? I did not realize he had 6.
It's been.
I know Ben Long's goal was really cool.
His third one, yeah. Damn, it felt like Will Graham honestly had more than 9 disposals. He kicked 1-1 and had 7 tackles. He was just involved in a lot of Providence sequences, I think, even though he didn't have all that many touches. The younger guys, the academy products of recent years, between Rogers and Reed and Graham, like all of them played their part. There was literally like, were there Suns players with whom I was dissatisfied? I mean, not really. Aside from the fact that Charlie Ballard unfortunately did his ACL.
Unit lost.
How much of this was Eagles bad and how much of this was Suns good?
It was more Eagles bad. Even when they brought more pressure, they were still off the Suns' pace. Liam Duggan looked lost a decent amount of the time. And as he goes, the Eagles often go. Even though we had 20 touches, he was like still a little bit on my radar for worst on round. Let's see, when West Coast actually did a couple right things, it was actually when Archer Reed had an opportunity in the ruck. which was about the middle of the third quarter. Ended up actually winning a bit against Jared Witz. Did all right for himself there. So more of that, just more of giving the younger guys opportunities in the difficult spots. But also like Hawthorne did on Friday to Essendon, when the Eagles had nice things going every now and then, Gold Coast immediately answered with a center clearance and a goal. Multiple.
And it was nowhere near as close as Essendon ever got, right?
Nope. It didn't end up being a fun watch.
Some way or somehow, round one, and it's, I haven't seen really anything in these teams other than like a couple of brief preseason highlights.
I'll tell you what you will like is your sleeper who you've liked for a long time for the Suns actually going off.
I mean, we've seen what Bailey Humphrey does when he's on. Let's see him do something in just like an okay game. Although it's pretty cool to have him do this in somewhere other than Darwin.
And also to do it without him actually hitting the scoreboard. 5 clearances, 5 assists, and 4 marks off 20.
5 goal assists is a lot.
Like, Brian Myers would be proud of that. But it was a massacre at the source. The Raul Miller-Anderson triumvirate was all that they honestly needed there. Just, you look at the stats, and Yamahama, it was fright night for some of these. They nearly doubled them in inside 50, 67 to 34. Clearances were 50 to 33. More than doubled them up in marks inside 50, 19 to 8, despite the damnedest efforts of Jeremy McGovern. And Harry Edwards, but just Ben King had his number. And when Ben King's on, it's hard to stop him. It's going to be a year of growth for the Eagles. People were joking about, man, is Richmond going to win a game? Man, are the Eagles going to win one?
Yes, they will. Just the sheer advantage of having teams have to make the long trip to Perth, that alone will get them a couple.
North will beat them at Bunbury, yes. I don't know. I want to see what the Suns do against a real team. And they'll have that opportunity round 3 Saturday afternoon.
What was positive for the Eagles?
First game, Jack Graham bringing the pressure with 10 tackles. Matt Flynn not looking lost outside the ruck. I mentioned Jinby and Hutchinson already, just growing as back flankers and wingers, and just getting games into guys. Honestly, just like Liam Baker, I'll say as well. Just still don't think his role was maximized being in the back, but when so much of the game was being played in that part of the ground, he had a decent amount of touches in there. Nice to see Elijah Hewitt get through a game, even though he was quite fumbly. Still not sure about Tyrell Dewar and where he really fits into things, because I didn't like him being in the back and taking the kick-ins.
So the biggest positive was that they played football.
They did play football.
I mean, you literally said like getting games into the youngsters, like seriously, just they played football.
I was going to mention something about the Allen and Waterman tandem, but Waterman was trying to push through an ankle injury. He did for a little more than a half and then got subbed out, and he'll be out this week. So fatten up on your percentage, Brisbane Lions. Not like you needed a prompt.
What do we notice differently, like style-wise with McWalter? Do they do less of the stuff where they try to reverse it through the back, or what's like schematically, what's different?
Eagerness to use the quarter and less of like that stagnation in the back, which was expected and a good thing. I mean, there are some things about the offensive side of the game that are reminiscent of Premiership Richmond, and it was interesting seeing that against the Premiership Richmond coach.
Like, did they kind of try to load up one side, or
they tried that sometimes and ended up being outdone?
I mean, I still think Richmond probably on paper is worse, even awesome win and all. But let's revisit this maybe once we get through like gather round. Then teams will have 5 games in them.
The only team that should be panicking this early is Carlton. And they and their fan base are very good at panicking.
And if they win one game, then they're the best team ever again.
It is awards time. We got more awards to do this year because we created a few.
Mark of the week, your opening round winner was Sam Taylor's intercept of Brody Majacek while engaged with Daniel McStay. There was a one-hander from Hawthorne that I had liked. It was a 2-game round. Round 1 nominees, you got Tom Barris over Xavier Dersma, kind of foot to his back, kind of went over his shoulder. Tom Sparrow going back with the fly to the ball, one-handed mark in a contest with Lockie Whitfield, and Ben King taking a real proper hanger over Harry Edwards. Benjamin, what is your pick?
It's Benjamin talking right now, and
It's Ben.
That's your winner pretty easily. Thank you.
opening round goal of the week was Carl Amon with the slip out in the tackle, the juke, the give and go, all that. I mean, that's one that might not make it to Brownlow night, but will be in montages, definitely for Hawthorne this year.
I think it'll be like one of the top 10 of the season for sure, maybe better than that.
Your round one nominees, you had Brian Myers fielding a Bailey Smith kick and kicking from the right side boundary from 45 meters out for Geelong's first goal of the year.
Parentheses equinox.
And two on Sunday, so Ethan's watching these now. Josh Rochelle staying down with Darcy Fogarty flies, spinning away from two defenders, shuffling and snapping high, and Ben Long growling a Bailey Humphrey handball and snapping off one step on the boundary for his third of 4 goals. As much as I like Rochelle, that's a distant third. Long versus Myers, I think I know which way Ethan's going because he is who he is.
I actually, just watching it, got that Ben Long one, it's really close. The Ben Long one, the one thing is it, kind of barely made it across the goal line. I mean, Grian's kind of did too. This is tough. What was your reaction to it in real time versus your reaction to the Grian goal in real time?
See, that's complicated by my feelings for those games themselves. Because the Grian was just like, oh shit, that's your first goal? Meanwhile, Ben Long was like, are you fucking kidding me? That's awesome, but are you fucking kidding me?
But I think back to the Ed Richards against Geelong last year. It was like, whoa, even at our expense. It was, are you fucking kidding me? But also, wow. So if take the team factor out of it, just which one's the winner?
I think I take Ben Long.
I'll stick with Grian for now because it's Grian. If it was anybody else, I think I'd slightly go along, but it is close between those two. I think we can say that. Yeah,
it is.
We've had 3 really quality goals within the first round and slightly more.
So hopefully that keeps up.
We also have our behind of the week, which is something we introduced at my request. Basically, it's something that ends up being a really cool behind, whether it be because it was touched by a defender, grazed the post, or the play to set it up was great and then the kick was kind of weak.
Usually one of those first two. For example, last week, Tom Papley had this burst through the crowd and slid into a kick, but Jarman Itby touched it. This past week, there were a few nominees, but our winner was Jamie Elliott getting this super faint spike on edge from a chip close to the behind line when Lockie Jones had fumbled Travis Boak's handball.
I also did really like Isaac Kako racing in off a throw-in and powering his way through a Connor Nash tackle, but ultimately missing. Or as we call him, Iraqi Grian.
By the way, his sister definitely lives out here. Cool. Their mom wasn't there because his sister had just given birth out here. It's very clear, she lives here full time. So it's nice to know that I'm not the only one watching an Essendon game at 1 something a.m. here in San Diego.
Assist of the week, we've got Josh Rochelle. He ran onto a smothered James Peatling kick and soccered it into the goal square for Isaac Cumming. Grian had one pretty good slicing kick, but it was kind of your typical Grian Myers assist. And the other award that I came up with this year is worst on round. So if you don't recall, the worst performance by a player who played the entire game, not subbed in or subbed out. They were in it from start to finish. And we've got a runner-up and a winner for you. A respectable close second to Corey Wagner, who couldn't do anything to stop anyone from Geelong when they got into the forward 50, was trailing on marking stuff all the time and just got totally overwhelmed. But the winner, especially considering the magnitude of the game he played in and the very visible bad plays in significant moments, it's gotta be Nick Haynes.
And out of our 2 worst on-round winners, I see Nick Haynes as the one much more likely to continue suiting up in the AFL. Our main character for round 1, the first time it was actually a person this year, because last time it was Cyclone Alfred. It's Sam Lawler with his 2 goals and 1 flash.
Yeah, I didn't know about this until after the fact, but I guess people saw a lot of him.
And with that, we finish an overly long round 1 recap.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I will hopefully have more actual analysis because between now and when we record again, I will have seen some stuff. And honestly, huge thanks to Benjamin for taking the lead this weekend with me, literally not available.
You're lucky that I was wrapping up kind of a spring break, but I don't really have a spring break.
You have two kind of breaks.
But not really, because even though I had a break this week, I still had major stuff that was due.
See, that's bullshit.
Well, those deadlines weren't set by my university. They were kind of set by the state. Anyway, he's at Castle Media. I'm at Benjamin HK01.
Brian Harambe is chattering his teeth, looking up at the laser pointer stuff on the ceiling, and also grabbing the little keychain loop thing attached to said laser pointer. He is on Instagram at cat named Brian. I look forward to getting to actually watch and react to more footy stuff in real time. Because first off, it's more fun to share these reactions with you online. Second, it's also just beneficial, to be able to look in real time and see, oh, they have 8 of the last 9 center clearances and things like that. So I look forward to digesting more footy live the way it was meant to be as we move on pretty quickly to round 2. So thanks again. And again, seriously, Benjamin, you did a great job keeping this thing afloat. Now it's my turn to be Greg Jennings and put the team on my back.
I put a team on my fucking back, though.